Why does the Pilgrim's Progress still feel so powerful and relevant even after more than 300 years?
Because the story of Christian's journey from the city of destruction to the celestial city represents every human being's inner struggle. The temptations he faces, the burdens he carries, the failures, doubts, hopes, and final victory, all mirror the emotional and spiritual battles people experience in real life. Bunyan's simple but vivid storytelling makes the book timeless.
What exactly is Christian running away from at the start of the story?
He's fleeing the city of destruction, which symbolizes the sinful world destined for judgment. His growing sense of guilt and fear pushes him to seek salvation and peace.
Why is Christian carrying such a heavy burden on his back?
The burden stands for guilt, fear, and the weight of his sins. It only falls off when he reaches the cross, symbolizing forgiveness through faith.
Why does Christian ignore his family's pleas to stay?
Because he believes their love is keeping him from salvation. He knows they don't understand his spiritual fear, and he chooses eternal safety over temporary comfort.
What makes Evangelist such an important guide?
Evangelist appears whenever Christian is confused or tempted to give up. He represents spiritual guidance, someone who redirects the lost back to the right path.
Why does Christian fall into the Slough of Despond so quickly?
Because once people realize their sins, they often fall into despair. The slough is a symbolic swamp of guilt and fear that pulls a person down before they begin their journey properly.
Why does Mr. Worldly Wiseman almost ruin Christian's journey?
He represents human logic and worldly shortcuts. He convinces Christian to seek relief through moral effort rather than the true path of faith, leading him toward danger.
What does the Wicket Gate symbolize?
The small, narrow gate represents the beginning of true faith. Only those willing to leave behind pride and worldly attachments can enter.
Why does Christian's burden fall off at the foot of the cross?
It shows that salvation doesn't come from effort, knowledge, or good works. It comes from grace. The weight of his guilt is removed only through Christ.
Why are the hill difficulty and the two easier paths so symbolic?
The hill represents the hard but right path of spiritual growth. The other two paths, danger and destruction, represent easy choices that lead to ruin.
What lesson does Christian learn from the Palace Beautiful?
He learns that true believers receive strength, community, and spiritual armor before facing bigger battles. It's a place of rest and preparation.
Why does Christian have to fight Apollyon?
Apollyon personifies Satan or spiritual evil. The battle represents the intense temptation and inner conflict believers face.
Why is the Valley of the Shadow of Death such a frightening part of the journey?
It symbolizes deep fear, depression, and spiritual darkness. The narrow, dangerous path shows how close a person can come to despair.
Why does Christian become close friends with Faithful?
Because fellowship on a spiritual journey is important. Faithful strengthens Christian's courage and shares his experiences honestly.
Why is Vanity Fair one of the most memorable episodes?
Because it captures the world's temptations, pleasure, fame, wealth, pride. Christian and Faithful must resist everything society values. Faithful's martyrdom makes the episode emotionally powerful.
Why is Faithful's death not a defeat?
Because the book portrays martyrdom as victory, faithful reaches the celestial city before Christian. His death strengthens Christian's resolve.
What does Hopeful bring to the story after Faithful is gone?
Hopeful encourages Christian through conversations, reminding him of forgiveness, grace, and the future reward. He represents optimism and perseverance.
Why do Christian and Hopeful fall into the hands of giant despair?
Because they leave the main path and take a shortcut. The episode teaches that deviation from the right path leads to mental torment and hopelessness.
What does Doubting Castle symbolize?
It symbolizes spiritual depression, doubt, and loss of courage. Giant despair is the voice that tells believers to give up.
Why is the key of promise so important?
Because God's promises in Scripture give believers hope and a way out of despair. Christian escapes when he remembers these promises.
Why is the Delectable Mountains episode so hopeful?
The mountains represent spiritual maturity, clarity, and renewed strength. The shepherds help them see the dangers ahead and guide them with wisdom.
Why does ignorance follow his own path instead of Christian's?
Ignorance believes he can reach heaven through his own righteousness. He symbolizes self-deception, religion without true faith.
Why is the enchanted ground a dangerous part of the journey?
Because it symbolizes spiritual laziness, sleep, and distraction. Many people stop caring about spiritual growth and lose vigilance.
What does Christian learn from meeting atheist?
He learns that some people reject faith simply because they trust only in what they can see. Atheist mocks hope and tries to discourage believers.
Why is the river of death so symbolic?
It represents physical death, the final barrier between life and heaven. Christian struggles, but Hopeful supports him. It shows that faith can waver even at the end.
Why does Hopeful cross the river more easily than Christian?
Hopeful has a stronger confidence in God's promises. Christian, despite his long journey, still experiences fear and doubt.
What does the celestial city represent?
Heaven, the place of eternal joy, rest, and fulfillment. It is the final reward for perseverance.
Why does ignorance fail to enter the celestial city?
Because he lacks true faith. He trusted his own works, not the proper way. His end is a warning about self-righteousness.
Why does Bunyan write the book as an allegory?
Because allegory makes spiritual themes easier to understand. Every character and location stands for a real human experience or moral truth.
What does the entire journey symbolize?
The Christian life, from awareness of guilt, through trials and temptations, to faith, hope, growth, and final salvation. As the pilgrim walks through shadow and sunrise, if this journey has spoken to your own, let your quiet support follow, a like, a subscribe, and we travel onward together.